Welcome back to the Basketball Show. I'm your host, Paul Sir, here on Sports 1440. Joined once again by my absolute favorite basketball writer in general. Never mind just the NBA, but everything that Ben Golliver writes, I love his podcast, and always feel like it's a real pleasure and an honor to have him on. Ben, welcome to the show.
Well, you're too kind. It's great to be here. How are you doing?
Doing great. Playoff time in basketball. March Madness in the rearview mirror, way in the rearview mirror. Had an interesting, I think, WNBA draft. Maybe we'll have time to touch on that and a couple of WNBA. I think I'd call them issues because I think the WNBA's growing pains are very obvious right now. But let's jump into the playoffs. And I think where I'd love to start is I tried to encapsulate what my thoughts were about last night's game, the play-in game between Golden State and Memphis, Ben. Two real quick observations. Playoff Jimmy was there. This nickname is so appropriate because this guy becomes a different player. So maybe let's start there. Then I want to touch on Steph Curry. But tell me about your impression of Playoff Jimmy.
Well, I thought that was just a very high-level play-in tournament game. You know, I know the Grizzlies lost, but I felt like it was sort of a loss with dignity. You know, they didn't go in and roll over. They had, fired their coach a couple of weeks ago. They had been backsliding into the play-in tournament. They did not want to start their playoff run off on the road against the Golden State Warriors in a play-in tournament game, right? They did not envision themselves in this situation. And I thought they came out and punched pretty well. You know, it pushed the Warriors a little bit, and it really did require some of the best that we've seen from Jimmy and also from Steph here this season. Those guys, the experience stuff always matters so much. And I think spinning it ahead when people are looking at this Warriors versus Rockets matchup, the Rockets have had an incredible season, earning the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. But I think just about everyone's going to be looking at playoff Jimmy and playoff Steph and saying that is a tall order for a whole bunch of young guys who don't have that playoff experience to slow down. With Jimmy, the most impressive part to me has been this cerebral passing, how well he's fit in there in Golden State. Playing him with Draymond is tricky because both those guys they're kind of non-shooters in terms of the three-point ball. Jimmy's a very reluctant three-point shooter, but because they have Steph and because they have that center Quentin Post who can step out and shoot it a little bit too, they haven't really run into the kind of spacing issues that you would expect. And so much of it is because Jimmy just has incredible touch and feel on the ball, finding backdoor cutters, really fitting in well to Golden State's motion style. And not every, superstar player just naturally takes to what Golden State's trying to do. Down the stretch, though, I did think it was Steph. I mean, how many big shots to put away the Grizzlies? It feels like at this point we've seen Steph hit hundreds of clutch shots, and I'm not sure anybody's surprised by that anymore. The only question is he going to do the night-night celebration or not? That's the real drama. So I felt like the deserving team won. There was a lot of crazy ref stuff going on in that fourth quarter, too, that I think angered both sides. It was a challenging matchup for a player like Zach Edey. I think it's a good situation. The Grizzlies center, hailing from Canada, I think he's going to be able to take some learning lessons from this in terms of being strong with the ball, but he contributed as well on the glass and kind of kept the Grizzlies in it at times as well. Just a lot going on in that game. It felt like a playoff game, which is the whole idea of the play-in tournament, to kind of get you excited and ready to go. But ultimately the experience won out. The high-end talent won out, and now the Grizzlies are going to be playing for their season on Friday, but at least they get to do it at home.
What you said about Edey is, I think, is very accurate, and I think Edey's overall season, given the kind of player he is, how it is not the kind of player that you associate often at all with being effective in an NBA team, but the kind of player he is, and the type of lessons that he's learned. If Memphis stays committed to Zach Edey, he's going to get better and better. And like you said, last night, at times he looked like a 7'4" rookie who got swarmed and just was not quite ready for that kind of moment, that kind of intensity in the playoffs. But, I mean, his numbers were very good. He was very effective on the boards. And one of the things he does, and you would expect from someone 7'4", is he does change a lot of shots in the paint.
Yeah. No question. And I think what's so important for his role in Memphis is they've just decided that Jaren wants to play the four. It's very much like Anthony Davis. When they drafted Jaren in the lottery, I thought the idea would be eventually to try to transition him into being a five, but he does not rebound well enough. And I think he still suffers from some foul trouble issues where he's just much more comfortable in that power forward role where he can kind of rove and block a lot of shots and be very active. And so that requires playing a center next to him. So I think sometimes the people are frustrated with Zach Edey. Well, they should really be frustrated with Jaren Jackson Jr. because he's the one who's saying, I want to play four, not the five. He's the one who's kind of requiring you to play a big bodied guy like Edey in that role. They used to have Steven Adams in that spot. He was very effective in that role as well. So it's a good look for Memphis, but I think ultimately, like, Edey kind of winds up being the scapegoat in some of these situations where, you need Jaren to really emerge as a all-star level center, a guy who can really allow you to space things out when he's a stretch five. But instead, he's just sort of kind of gone the Anthony Davis approach. And to me, it's long-term, it'll be less effective that way. But I understand why he prefers it. It's less banging on his body. You let Edey handle all the elbows and the physical play and all that kind of stuff. And he winds up being the bodyguard for a player like Jaren. But, this Grizzlies team is interesting. I feel bad for Taylor Jenkins. He gets fired 2 weeks ago, and then he has to watch his team, screw up an inbounds play, 5-second call with the entire season on the line, practically with 5 seconds left in that game. I mean, that's a tough spot to be in. Of course, the interim coach, I'm sure, is going to be having sleepless nights because of that. So the Grizzlies have a whole bunch of things, in the mix right now. We didn't even talk about Ja Morant, who had the ankle injury, and he's taken painkillers, it seems like, to come back out and play. That was a crazy dramatic scene as well, and I thought he did okay on that bum wheel. So I think the Grizzlies, a lot of issues they've got to work through, and we'll see how they approach it this summer. I wouldn't be shocked if they traded Ja Morant. They have a lot of talent on that team. It's very cohesive. For a lot of the season, they're playing without Ja. And so that gives opportunities for somebody like Edey to really step forward and surpass expectations for a rookie. We'll see how that all shakes out. But, to me, it's a fascinating team to watch because this is a young team we thought was going to be one of the best in the Western Conference for years and years. And now their future is just kind of murky.
Yeah, it is murky. And I think a lot of it stems from an individual like Ja Morant, who through his actions off the court and now most recently on the court with his gesturing, just finds a way to disrupt what really should be a very, very good situation that in a lot of ways would mirror what they've got going on in OKC. But when you got a wild card like that, it can just throw a baseball bat in the spokes of your wheel and disrupt everything because all of a sudden the attention goes away from what you're doing on the court. And instead you're focusing on the antics that are just unnecessary and unproductive.
No, and it's just like, it's grown on itself too, right? I mean, I saw his comments recently saying, well, now I'm being treated as the villain, so I'm going to act like the villain. And it's like, well, I mean, people are just reacting to your behavior. You got to understand this is a reasonable response from fans and from media partners and from, his brand deals and all that. Everybody's looking at him saying, hey, man, you don't need to have guns on Instagram. It's not very complicated, right? Of course, that's going to be turning people off. And I think now he feels targeted. He feels like maybe the response went too far. He's getting a little defensive, and he's kind of gone into his shell and just said, well, I'm going to be me. And he hasn't really showed a ton of public accountability. And I think that's lost him a lot of fans. A lot of people who thought, well, this was a guy who could become the best point guard in the NBA. And instead, I think that window has kind of passed him by. The Shai Gilgeous-Alexander comparison is a great one from you because here's a guy who's just put his head down, done everything the right way, never makes a negative headline, has emerged as a great leader. And here the Thunder are, basically 16 games up on everybody in the Western Conference and hoping they can make the finals for the first time since Kevin Durant, right? So, you do wish there was a little bit more Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to Ja Morant, and I'm sure the Grizzlies do as well.
Absolutely. I'm talking with Ben Golliver of the Washington Post here on the Basketball Show. My final thought on last night, Ben, was, my gosh, are we lucky to be able to watch Steph Curry still be able to do things in the latter stages of that game that really and truly only Steph Curry does. And it's not like other players don't hit big shots, because they do. But I don't think there's anybody that has ever hit the kind of shots in the way that Steph Curry does it. Is that a valid statement?
He has totally redefined degree of difficulty when it comes to three-point shots, not only in terms of distance, in terms of the number of moves required to get the shot off when he's like just operating with the ball in his hands, with the amount of energy that he has to expend when he's off the ball, the amount of contact he takes before he even gets to have the pass, right? In terms of what he's fighting through on a play-by-play basis, the degree of difficulty for his shooting is unlike anyone else in the NBA. And the fact that he's able to maintain his efficiency is just incredible, especially at his age, right? I mean, we used to always talk about age curves and just the natural decline that you would see for guys. And usually it would come through in how many shots they'd be able to get off per game because they're not able to handle the minutes, they're not able to handle the workload. Then you would see that age decline come in the efficiency because they just can't operate at the same level that they did when they're tired or they're fatiguing early, their legs are going. And with Steph, it's like he's just completely defying age in his own way. It's been incredible. And that's why if you're the Houston Rockets, you've got to be quaking in your boots. Now, look, they've got some guys they could throw on Steph, no question. I mean, they got some perimeter defense. They're going to try to wear him down. I'm sure Ime Udoka is going to be preaching physicality, physicality, physicality throughout that series. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're seeing some ejections and some, flagrant fouls and technical fouls early in that series as Houston tries to set a tone, especially on their home court. But we've been saying this for the last 15 years. There's not really a way to stop Steph Curry. If some coach had figured it out, everybody would be doing it by now, right? There's not really a Curry rules out there. You're just hoping that you can make it as challenging for him as possible, and then you hope the numbers are in your favor, right? I mean, you just hope he misses and has a cold stretch, and you're able to survive it. I mean, that's really all there is to it. So, I don't take it for granted. I hope basketball fans out there don't take it for granted. And when you look at the Warriors' TV ratings and their just continued popularity, even as they go through these different iterations, they lose Kevin Durant, they lose Klay Thompson, now they bring in Jimmy Butler. They still have just a rock solid base of interest. And to me, that's pretty much just all people who are watching Steph Curry shoot the ball like nobody's done it before.
Nobody's done it before, and nobody does it in the same way, like you're pointing out, Ben. It's the counters to the counter to the counter that Curry just keeps developing off the ball, on the ball, with the ball, off the screen and roll, flaring away from the ball. His total basketball IQ, off the charts IQ. And the way he figures out with everybody draped all over him, figures out ways to get open, to get the ball either for the shot or once he gets the ball. If somebody's off balance at all, he has so many different ways to beat you. And that includes the mid-range teardrop all the way to the rim. The way his game has evolved, the way he's changed his body, I really admire that a guy at 37 who, one real quick tangent, Bill Russell retired at 35. And when Bill Russell retired, he looked like a guy that was 80, like physically. Yeah. But I suppose when you're wearing Chuck Taylors for your whole basketball career, that has its impact on you. But we just see how the game's evolved, but we also see how the work ethic's evolved as well.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, with Steph, you saw it last night. He threw in a couple extra pump fakes on that one step back three just to get himself on balance. Earlier in his career, the idea was that you were going to pick him up super high. You were going to go over the top of every screen. You were going to deny him the threes. And then he just got so good at the back cuts. He got so good at the slicing through the defense for layups that wound up not being a very efficient strategy. So you had to kind of keep it more honest. He's a willing passer, even if there have been turnover issues for a long time. So, hard doubling him or tripling him is not really a sustainable strategy, especially now that they have Jimmy Butler to kind of balance things. So, he just makes life miserable, for everybody that goes against him. And he loves the big moments. That's the other thing, too. There's so many times he's taking very high degree of difficulty shots that for almost any other player in the league would be like 20% shots. but there's 2 minutes left. The pressure's on. And I think most everybody in the building expects him to make it because he's done it so many times before. And his confidence and his work habits, like you've described, have prepared him to make them again. So I think the NBA, you don't want to skip steps, but there's a chance you get Lakers Warriors in the second round, and that would be, an awful fun series. Adding Luka Doncic and Jimmy Butler to the mix, I think it would be the sixth time that Steph would play LeBron in the playoffs. Of course, they met in all those finals consecutively back in the Cleveland Golden State era. So again, you don't want to skip steps, but that's something that for basketball fans to potentially look forward to here over the next couple weeks.
Well, you meant I think a lot of people are going to go to the conspiracy theory worry about our friends in the stripes with the whistles over the next series, because last night, that second half, sometimes I tell you what, Ben, you watch the officiating, and it goes across all sports, of course, but in basketball, you watch the officiating and you just go, man, this just does not make sense at all. And the second half had a lot of those this doesn't make sense moments.
Yeah, the frustrating ones are when they go to the reviews and the challenges and the explanations still don't make sense. And it's like, all right, so we're wasting our time, but we're not getting any closer to clarity here. It is frustrating how those games slow down at the end. That's such a fun, high-level game, and there's just so much hijinks. People are fouling out left and right, and questionable calls, and we're looking at all these different camera angles. I don't like the Zapruder aspect of like breaking down the tape on these foul calls at all. I wish there was a pure, simpler version where it's just about the basketball and not about the referee staring at the little TV monitors. But the NBA's kind of backed itself into a corner on this stuff. They're trying to get perfection with this review system, and they're just committed to it. I'm not sure why, but they seem unwavering in their desire to review every last call, and so that's what you sort of get as a viewer, unfortunately.
Well, and especially on fouls, out of bounds, goaltending, stuff that's kind of black or white. All right, that I get that, and you have the technology to do it. But boy, when you're second guessing foul calls, that's tough. That's really tough down the stretch. That's where the human element almost has to be played out. Let's jump over to the Eastern Conference. A couple of series that I'm really that I think are going to be very, very interesting are the Pistons and the Knicks and the Bucks and the Pacers. Now, in the Bucks and the Pacers case, if I had to bet today. And of course, if Lillard comes back and he's really effective, that raises the Bucks' chances. But the way Indiana has been playing, I can't help but feel that the Pacers, after their success last year, are pretty well prepared for this first round.
Well, this feels a little bit like a legacy series for Giannis to me. And I say that because he's smack dab in the middle of his prime at 30. He's, been with Milwaukee for 12 years now. There's always been whispers like, has it run its course? Is he going to try to, force his way out and so forth? But he's smack in the middle of his prime, and he's looking at the possibility of a third straight first round exit with the Bucks. If you go through all of his contemporaries, LeBron, KD, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, the players that truly matter from these generations, none of those guys have ever been eliminated in the first round 3 years in a row. They might not even make the playoffs in some cases. There could be injuries, but they always find a way to advance, sooner or later. So that's a real drought. And if you're Giannis, you're staring at this crossroads moment of turning 30. Obviously, he's got a big and growing family, so moving markets might sound like a hassle, might be a challenge, and he's been very, very loyal there in Milwaukee. But if they go down quick against a Pacers team who you've said comes in with momentum, comes in with a depth advantage, comes in with some real high-end talent in guys like Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, comes in with the knowledge of home court advantage and the fact that the Pacers beat the Bucks in last year's playoffs, and there's no Damian Lillard on top of it. If Milwaukee goes down early, I feel like there's got to be some repercussions, right? I mean, I don't know if they would fire the coach again because they've already pushed that button in the past. I don't know if they would pursue a Lillard trade. I don't know if Giannis would just say enough is enough. But it feels to me like if you've got a 30-year-old two-time MVP in his prime, and he can't get out of the first round of the playoffs in the Eastern Conference for 3 years in a row, that is a glaring red flag, red light, warning type of situation. Now, ultimately, I'm going to pick the Pacers in this series. I think we're headed to that kind of dire situation for Milwaukee because I just think there's a little bit too much baggage here for Giannis to carry. He doesn't have Middleton, his longtime sidekick, anymore. And I understand that trade because Middleton really, the injuries caught up to him. But now you're talking about going into a playoff series with Kyle Kuzma, who's been one of the least effective NBA players over these last couple of years, and also Kevin Porter Jr., a guy who's never been in these kind of moments, who they have been very, very reliant upon, a very shaky decision maker, inconsistent player, up and down, very heavily reliant upon tough twos. Just not the kind of guy you would pencil in as a real playoff asset. They really rely on him. They really rely on Kuzma now, right? They only have a couple of players left on this roster who are on the 2021 championship team for Milwaukee. So I just think it's too big of a burden. I think Giannis is carrying too much into this series. He's got too much dead weight around him. I think the Pacers are going to take care of it. And then at that point, I think it's going to be a big-time crossroads moment, both for Giannis and for the Bucks.
And there's some history in Milwaukee that's somewhat unique when you look way back to the trade of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar out of Milwaukee to the Lakers, which really defined both franchises. And so it's amazing in the NBA, like in so many, not just sports, but in life in general, how history repeats itself.
No question.
And and so the precedent's there, the kind of the karma's there. What you're describing right now, I think, Ben, could be very, very accurate. At what point does Giannis say, I really would like to have a chance with another franchise to do something special, because I don't think that's going to happen here in Milwaukee.
Well, and they took their shot with Lillard, and it didn't work, right? Yeah. So how do you pivot? That's kind of the question. They've backed themselves into a corner, and boy, they miss a guy like Drew Holiday, don't they? I mean, that's
oh my God.
One of the overriding feelings here of these last couple of years is I know Bucks fans would get on him because he would shoot like 6 for 19 in playoff games, but he would give you the entire perimeter defense all by himself, and that's really, really important. And the Bucks have really just lost their defensive identity here these last couple of years. And if you lose that, you don't win a lot of playoff games.
You don't. I'm talking with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the Basketball Show. Ben, our time's going to get short quickly, but we've got two really significant series because of who the teams are that are clashing with each other in the West, and also because you happen to live in the city where a lot of this action is going to take place, and that's the Lakers versus the T-Wolves and the Clippers versus Denver. I mean, my gosh, you have to be the luckiest basketball reporter in the world right now.
Well, I feel that way every year. It's amazing how things tend to line up in Los Angeles. It's from a basketball standpoint, it's a very blessed place. I think this Lakers series is great because it's a rematch for Luka against the Timberwolves, right? That was a fun series. Now, it wasn't a long series last year, that Western Conference Finals, but Luka really was hitting the peak of his powers in some of those late game moments against the Timberwolves. So, the Minnesota is going to have a bad taste in their mouth. They're going to want to get revenge, and they're going to be the classic underdog, the smaller market underdog, where everybody's going to be picking the Lakers, and they're going to have to go on the road and try to pull the upset. So that's just really, really juicy. I think for the Lakers, the things you want to look at, they're going to try to pick on Gobert because they've got 3 excellent perimeter ball handlers in Luka, LeBron, and Reeves. And I think those guys are just going to take turns going at Gobert, trying to pull him out away from the hoop, try to get him into foul trouble, and really test him in space. And so I think that's going to be a key part of their offensive strategy. And then defensively, the guy who I would, from a Lakers standpoint, they're very small at the center position, right? There's going to see a lot of undersized lineups. They're going to play a guy like Jackson Hayes, who's a very thin, mobile center, but not necessarily the world's, best rim protector or paint presence. They're going to play him at times too. So the question from Minnesota's standpoint is who can exploit that? And the guy I would circle would be Naz Reid as an X factor. Of course, Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards are going to be the main sources of offense for Minnesota. But if you're going to try to pick on the Lakers' interior weakness, you're going to need a big body, a skilled player in paint, a guy who you can trust with the basketball. And I would say that would be Naz Reid. He's a guy who should have been in the six-man conversation this year. He won it last year. To me, he's one of the X factors for this series because Minnesota, they're going to need to keep up from a scoring standpoint. The Lakers have been very machine-like. Luka's averaging 31 points per game over the last month. He obviously had that incredible 45-point showing in his return game to Dallas, which was just a beautiful moment. So, you're going against a buzzsaw. The Lakers are going to score the basketball, and I think the Timberwolves, to keep up, they're really going to need a lot from Naz Reid.
Let's jump over to the Clippers Nuggets right now, because, Ben, this I think is one of the most, maybe this, if I had to pick one series that I'm most intrigued by, I think it would be this one, as intriguing as the Lakers are and the Warriors, et cetera. But this one's really got, I think, a lot of interesting and somewhat unusual elements to it, from the standpoint that the Clippers have been playing very, very well. We have the old Kawhi Leonard back. We haven't seen this version of Kawhi for a long, long time. But my goodness, is he playing well? And he and Harden are playing well off each other and together. And the entire Clippers team really seems to have found its stride in this last 4 weeks. Up against the Nuggets, who have had a lot of injury problems. We all know about Jokic. And here's the angle I'm taking, is the Jokic situation in Denver parallel to the Giannis situation in Milwaukee? Is this the year Nikola says, I can't carry a team forever, and I want to look at something different? Now, that's a bit dramatic. I'm way ahead of myself. The Nuggets are pretty healthy going into it. Murray is back, seems to be in pretty good form at least. Jokic is a monster. He always plays to win. But just working through this, to be honest, from my vantage point right now, if I had to pick, I'm picking the Clippers to win this series.
Well, I think it's going to be one of those where it's very split on who people pick, and it's probably going to be 7 games you would expect. Now, It's a fascinating series because the Clippers have overachieved so much, probably like 10, 15 wins over what people expected during the preseason. And the Nuggets have underachieved probably by like 8 to 10 wins over what people might have expected during the preseason. And yet they landed at the same spot, right? So that tells you people like the Nuggets' talent more on paper than they like the Clippers' talent, right?
Yes.
And so now, to me, it's almost like this is the moment where we wipe the slate clean. I do think Jokic is going to be by far the best player in this series, even though Kawhi has been great. Like you said lately, I mean, Jokic is just on a different planet, right?
Yeah, he is. So, absolutely.
So the question comes down, do you trust his supporting cast maybe more than you do like a Milwaukee supporting cast? And that's why I circled Jamal Murray. The whole series comes down to him. He's going to have a long couple weeks because Chris Dunn is going to make his life miserable. He's going to be up in his jersey. He's going to be fouling him. He's going to be trying to make him uncomfortable. Jamal Murray is a very, very good player. So if Jamal Murray plays like he can, the Nuggets are going to win this series. If he gets neutralized, it's going to be a huge, huge burden on Jokic. And I think the Clippers' defensive strategy there is going to be, let's hope Zubac can just hold up well enough. He doesn't have to stop Jokic, but just hold up well enough, bend but don't break, and see if that is going to be enough. I think ultimately I will be taking the Denver Nuggets in 7, but it's super close, and I'm not very confident about it. And if Denver does go out in the first round, they're going to face some real choices too. Do they have to trade a guy like a Michael Porter Jr.? Do they have to trade an Aaron Gordon or a Jamal Murray? Can they reshuffle their contracts around Jokic to give him a better shot next season? Because it does feel like they've stalled out a little bit, especially compared to where they were during their championship run.
Absolutely. Ben, I know you've got to run. Thanks so much for spending time with us. And I'm going to be reaching out, as you know, real soon again as the playoffs get off and running. So many compelling storylines, such an interesting year of bizarre trades and player moves and coaching firings, like all this great drama going around. But still, when you boil it all down, the basketball that we should be seeing over the next few weeks on the court should be fantastic.
It's going to be a great run. I can't wait for this postseason. I say it every year, but I love the matchups. We didn't even talk about Knicks Pistons, and that's an incredible series too. I mean, we're all spoiled here.
Oh, we are. And you know what? It's for the game of basketball. Love being spoiled like this. So Ben Golliver, Washington Post, thanks so much for being with me today. Yeah, I can't say enough about the opportunity that I always am grateful for when I have the chance to talk with Ben, because the knowledge level is so deep and so experience based. Like, he's not gleaning this from reading. He's coming to his own conclusions from the viewing, the being there, the talking to the people that are so immersed in the game at the highest level. So just a great conversation. We're going to take a break right now and come back. Unfortunately, Yvonne Edgen had a conflict and was not able to join us today. She will be with us, however, next week. So Ryan and I will come back and we'll talk about who won the FIBA 3x3 jersey and shorts, because some great texts, but the one that we chose is just fantastic. So lots to talk about in our last segment here on the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440.